And when you look at, the movements, Me Too movement, other, movements in the past couple of years where women were, becoming very vocal about it again, it is of national interest, right? There is an urgency to decide over this, right? Because it's a very important matter, right? And it's protecting women, against anti-sex and discrimination, right?
Islander News is here today with Vera Zambrano. Vera Zambrano is the head of an international law firm, and she specializes in national and international law. She's here today to discuss the Equal Rights Amendment and its implications. So, good afternoon, Vera. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you so much.
So, please tell us about yourself and your practice.
Yes, so my name is Vera Zambrano, and I'm the lead attorney of Vera Zambrano and Associates. And we are doing mostly international law, right? So between the United States and Europe, especially between the US and Germany. And we represent a lot of individuals, families, but also companies in international law.
Okay, great. And can you tell us what the Equal Rights Amendment is and how it came into being?
Yes, so the ERA, right, the Equal Rights Amendment is a proposed constitutional amendment, right? And it should guarantee equal rights, especially for all citizens, regardless of sex. So especially it's a supportive amendment for women, right? To have, protection for women in the Constitution of the United States. So the original version was equality of rights under the law that shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. The Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. Right. So when we look at it, it's a pretty old amendment, actually. It was first tried to pass, right, in 1923. So over 100 years ago already, right, and it passed Congress. Both houses of Congress, actually, the House of Senate and the House of Representatives, right? But it did not get ratified in all of the states that it was necessary. So we have 50 states in the United States, and it had to pass 38 states, right? So 3/4 would have been necessary, but that was not the case for a very long time. So the last state that was ratifying this amendment was actually Virginia, right? It was 2020. So right now we should have enough states that were ratifying this amendment to become part in the Constitution, right? But now we have legal problems actually that occur. So if you want me to, just tell me if you want me to get a little bit more into detail, or yes.
Sure. Yes. So first, I wanted to just ask if you can tell us kind of like other amendments that were also ratified that were then kind of announced or certified in a similar way, which is by what Senator Gillibrand is saying, had said is that since President Biden announced it to either the House of Representatives or the Senate, then he, in effect, announced it to the states and satisfied that requirement of the amendment. So if you can tell us a little bit about other amendments that have been certified in a similar way rather than by the archivist, but by the president itself.
Yes, so we have to first understand that it's a very, very lengthy process, right? It's not something that goes overnight or a couple of months, so it takes years, in this case, over 100 years to actually, get enough states to ratify it, but it's very lengthy and it's also very complicated, in fact, right? So we heard that we have to have 2/3 of the Congress, right, that have to first, it has to pass the Congress by 2/3, and it then must be approved by 3/4 of the states, right? In total. So it's not right when people assume it can be clarified by the president, right? Because the president is not eligible, like he's not able to actually like declare it or confirm it, right? It has to pass through the states. And it's so because we have the different powers here in place, right? The president is an executive power, and here it has to pass the legislation, right? So the president could probably not even do anything about it, right? It has to go. Now we're seeing what it happens now is that it will become a part, a national request actually, and it will have to be determined by the Supreme Court. That's what's going to happen, because there are voices in the government that said you cannot, after such a long time, and the period of ratification has passed a long time already, because they would have had to ratify until 1982. We're past that a long time already. So either the Congress could extend the period for ratification, or it's, all the states that have ratified it becomes invalid, and you would have to, start from the beginning.
Okay. So, is that kind of like, yeah, so if you would be able to kind of detail some of the legal issues that it is facing right now, because I know like when Senator Gillibrand had spoken, she said that the national, I believe it was the board, the Bar Association rather, said that it should be considered ratified because once it's actually ratified by those 38 states, it's just everybody understands, I guess, that now it's part of the Constitution. Nobody actually really has to say it. But so if you could tell us kind of some of the legal challenges that it's facing right now and some of the issues that are going on with it, that would be great.
Yes, so as I already said, there was a certain deadline that the Congress gave, all the states, right, to ratify. And we had a long time, we had only a couple of states ratifying it. Then some of the states even, they withdraw their ratification. They said, we're no longer, approving the amendment. So they took it even back. That was also valid, right? So we went forth and back between, a couple of states. Then we had 30 for a couple of years ago. And then finally, 3 years ago now, the last state was Virginia. Before that, it was Nevada and Illinois, right? So the last state was actually Virginia. But now what the archivist is saying of the United States, what it has to approve and has to sign the ratification, he says that he believes that it's no longer valid, right? Because the timeline has passed. So what he's suggesting is that the Supreme Court has now to make a decision over it, right? Because it's more a political issue now than a legal issue. It's more like, do you really want to extend the deadline? It depends a lot on the government, on the political leadership also, right? Because the Trump administration has made it clear that they see it as invalid, right? They see it because of the timeline has passed. So they no longer approve the 38th state, which is Virginia. And so now it's like very uncertain what happens with it. So I don't think we have anytime soon the amendment in the Constitution, actually. Even though it would help women, right? It would help women in a lot of aspects of life, right? Not only in employment, in healthcare, also in court proceedings, right? In divorce matters, in every kind of employment, pretty much payments, salaries, even promotion. Then what is also a big issue is like the military, right? That women have the same access to it and also the same treatment, right? And there's not, any discrepancy between men and women anymore. So it would help a lot the American women actually, right? In the public eye, but also like in legal issues, because what is the difference is when it's in the Constitution, women can actually sue, right? And can sue someone. And the courts have to enforce it, right? Because as long as it's not in the Constitution, you cannot really, get back to it and say, I want to enforce my right because it is not part of the Constitution yet. And one last thing I wanted to also say what I have read was 3 years ago was the recent poll in, between the Americans, right? And 95% of the American people are actually pro the amendment, right? They are confirming it. They want this amendment in the Constitution. So it would also be, it's not only political, you have to also, keep up with the society. And what are the people, is the majority of the American people actually what they want, right? And that is, that is the amendment, right? The ERA in the Constitution.
Right, right. And so what you were saying about that they're asking the Supreme Court to kind of step in, is it normal that the Supreme Court would kind of be called upon to step in at this stage? Or do you mean like it's going to be going through the court system for like the next 5 years or something and finally get to them? Or is this something that it seems like they might just say yes or no and accelerate it, and then it can go back down to the lower courts with challenges?
Yes, so I believe it's very uncommon, right, to call the Supreme Court on something like that because it's a legislation process. Usually, it has to go through Congress, the both houses, right, and then it has to be approved by the archivist. It has to be ratified by the state. So it has usually nothing, nothing to do with the court system, right, the legal justice system. So these are two different systems in place. But here, the court will have to decide, is the deadline still, can you actually extend the deadline? Can the Congress go back and say, we need to extend it? And all the states that have already been ratifying this amendment, these votes are still valid or not, right? So I believe that when they call the Supreme Court would have to make a pretty shortly decision, right? To not drag it on the next years, because it has already been placed over 100 years ago, right? And when you look at, the movements, Me Too movement, other, movements in the past couple of years where women were, becoming very vocal about it again, it is of national interest, right? There is an urgency to decide over this, right? Because it's a very important matter, right? And it's protecting women, against anti-sex and discrimination, right?
Right, right. So I know that one of the other things that the Senator Gillibrand had mentioned was that the time limit is not actually in the original amendment, and it's not in Article 5 of the Constitution. And so for that reason, they can't actually impose a deadline because there was nowhere to impose it. So I guess that's kind of like the question that's going to be before the court in the first place is, was there a deadline? Was the deadline valid?
Yes, and also the people who are actually say it is valid say if the Congress can set a deadline, if there's a deadline or not, but the Congress sets the deadline, so the Congress is also empowered to extend the deadline, right? So it is part of the Congress and its responsibility and not of the court system. So we will have to see if it really goes to the Supreme Court, right? And how the Supreme Court is going to decide. Maybe they call itself, we're not even eligible in this, we're not even responsible to make a decision. It has to go back to the Congress and they have to make a decision. So that's what I believe, that the courts will actually not say that it is a court issue or like a judicial problem, right? But it has to go through the legislation and the Congress has to make a decision. But I mean, you see that majority of American people are for the amendment in the Constitution, right? And it would be the 28th Amendment, actually, right? So you see that you cannot deny the American people, right? And what they want for the future.
Right, right. And then you had said some of the different things that the amendment would change with regards to women's rights, where they can't be discriminated against in pay, in employment. If you wanted to kind of go into how it changes women's rights and why it's so important, why the amendment itself is so important, that would be great.
Yes, so it would change specifically for women rights, right? It would change a lot for especially when it comes to employment, right? There would no discrimination. Also because a lot of women, younger women, they probably don't get the same chance, right, for a certain specific job. Most likely because they end up taking maternity leave or are not as available as young men are, just because of the nature, right, of the women's choices in life. But also when you see they have not the same healthcare coverage. So usually for the same service, the healthcare provider charges a woman more, right, or their health insurance more than the same service for a man. Then in the court system, in divorces, right, you see a lot of nowadays that women do not have the same access right? In certain aspects of, also properties, when it comes to divorces on assets, asset splits. So it is, it's going through the whole aspects of life. Every aspect of life is pretty much on the plate right here. And the problem is that as long as it's not in the Constitution, women cannot actually, go and sue someone based on that, right? If it's only a simple, in a simple regulation, right, and not in the Constitution, you cannot enforce it, and the courts would not, not be able to protect a woman under the ERA.
I see. Okay. Because from what I had understood, it's kind of like they're waiting for women to sue someone in order for them to then bring the amendment before the court itself and say, yes, this is a legitimate reason to sue someone, or no, it's not. So it's actually something where they've kind of gone back, even back further behind that kind of procedure where they're just trying to even bring it straight to the Supreme Court and say, is this valid before anyone can initiate a lawsuit?
Yeah, so you could see it that way, but what I just wanted to make very sure that the audience understands that if as long as it's not in the Constitution, it is very hard to actually prove a point based on the discrimination regarding between men and women, right? So you have to have it in the Constitution. At least we have 2025, right? There are so many other amendments that are not as relevant anymore, right? But they're still part of the Constitution and will always be, right? So we have to see, the society changes a lot, right, over the years, over the decades. So whatever has to be, is a national interest, and has to be protected, by the Constitution, right? It is, for me at least, it is the final call to get it into the Constitution, because we have to, there cannot be any more discrimination, right? Like you see like the race discrimination, the last discrimination that is like between men and women, which is still like unfortunately these days still in this world. So we have to make sure to be like also a role model, right, for other countries, because Europe and a lot of European countries, they actually copy principles of the United States, right, when it comes to like the Constitution and laws. So it would also be like being like maintaining to be a role model, right, for other countries.
Oh, I see. Okay. So, also there are things that affect women that don't affect men. Like there are certain types of healthcare that women need that, men don't need just because of they don't need to, they don't have babies, so they don't need that kind of healthcare and stuff like that. So it's interesting to see how this could actually play out in helping women's rights.
Yes.
You kind of actually talked about some of the legal challenges that they are expecting for this and some of the legal issues related to women. So, when it comes to like the expectation in the community, international and national community of lawyers, especially with regards to when the Bar Association said that people should consider it as ratified. What is their expectation for what's going to happen?
So what they want to see that's going to happen is that the all the states that have ratified it are still considered as valid, right? As valid state ratifications, and that the last one that was Virginia, that had to be the 38th state, that this was the last one we needed for the ratification, and that now there's no more obstacle, right, for this amendment to become part of the Constitution. So they want to see the archivists to say, this is, we have to ratify it. We have to, all the states, that are necessary now, 38 states have ratified it, and we have to, now the next step is that it becomes part of the Constitution without asking, the Congress to extend deadlines, right? Without even to go to court to have a decision on that.
Okay. And is there anything else that you would like to add about this conversation?
So far, I think I said a lot about, what the American people want, right? And no matter who who the leader, who the president is, you cannot make it a political decision. You cannot, right? Because it is about, it's about the women in this country, right? American women, and you have to see what can protect them best, right? And as long as it's not in the Constitution, there are certain laws that could protect, specifically women in some sorts of life, right, in some areas of life. But it's not an amendment, right? It's not the most important protection in the law, right? So I would say, listen to the American people, right, as a leader, and you have to also see where the society is turning to, right? And you have to protect your own citizens.
Right, absolutely. And what you said before about that Europe follows the US, are there countries in Europe that already have like an equal rights amendment, or do you mean that you expect that they will then make an equal rights amendment after the US does?
So when we look at Europe, a lot of countries they follow the U.S. Court systems, right? And also the Constitution is the role model is the U.S. that was in place first. But in Germany, for example, there is an article in the Constitution. It's not about women and men. It's just that everyone before the law has the same rights. But that's not the same, right? That's what we have in the U.S. as well. That's not the same. That it's not, protecting especially women based on their sex, right? So we need that specifically in the Constitution, which is also not in other constitutions so far.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. So, it was really great to speak with you today, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us about this very important issue.
Thank you so much.